If you've consumed Russian propaganda in the last decade plus, you might get the impression that Crimea is something of a paradise regained for the Russian public. A tropical Black Sea destination far from the pollution of Moscow or the frost of Siberia, where an honest Russian can make a fresh start. And relocating Russian citizens to Crimea to replace the Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar populations is key to the Kremlin's strategy for long-term control over the peninsula. Which is why it's ever so satisfying to see the lines of cars miles and miles long hightailing it back to the Russian mainland in recent weeks, as Ukraine wages an intensive campaign to blockade off the peninsula. I'm Belokur, back to reporting to you from Kyiv. This week, we're going to look at the difficulties that Russian occupiers are facing in Crimea as Ukraine ramps up drone strikes on infrastructure, logistic hubs, and military defenses. And the big question on everyone's mind: will Ukraine finally choke off Russia's hold on the peninsula and gain an upper hand on the original front line of this war? If you look at a map, you can see why Crimea is strategically important for Russia, because control over it means control over a massive naval base on the Black Sea. But it's never been just about the military advantage. The peninsula's illegal annexation in 2014 was also a huge symbolic victory for Vladimir Putin in his quest to reforge the defunct borders of the Soviet Union. Which is why the phrase "Crimea is ours" became something of a dog whistle among Russians who think that all Ukrainian territory is theirs to rightfully reclaim. The illegal annexation of Crimea has been one of Putin's biggest points of pride, which makes what's happening now extra humiliating for Moscow. But let's look at why the situation in Crimea has been going downhill so rapidly in summer of 2026. Because after all, the peninsula has been occupied by Russia for 12 years and has served as a major military launching pad and target throughout the full-scale invasion. So what's changing? Why is everyone clamoring to evacuate now? And is it really possible for Ukraine to isolate the peninsula, as Defense Minister Mykola Bielieskov recently claimed?
По суті, відбувається ізоляція Криму.
In essence, Crimea is being isolated by drones, and in the near future it looks like Crimea will turn into an island, and this could lead to very unexpected consequences for the Russians.
Дуже несподіваних наслідків для росіян.
Although its most obvious advantage is as a naval base, Russia isn't using Crimea for that much these days. You might remember the dramatic sinking of the Russian cruiser Moskva in April 2022 when it was hit by a Ukrainian missile, back when Russia was still sailing within striking distance. That hasn't been the case in years, largely thanks to Ukraine's water drones, one variety of which has the deceptively cute nickname Sea Babies. Since 2022, these kamikaze drones, which look like speedboats and sail straight into their targets, have been the bane of the Black Sea Fleet's existence. The use of naval drones, paired with a 2023 missile strike on Black Sea Fleet headquarters, forced Russia to relocate its navy from the Crimean port of Sevastopol to the Russian mainland port of Novorossiysk, where it has remained for nearly 3 years. Then we get to Russia's other defensive capabilities in Crimea. Ukraine got multiple significant hits on air bases and defensive systems between 2022 and 2024. And that effort to destroy Russian air defense has really intensified since 2025, as Ukrainian military intelligence has used special long-range loitering munitions to root out Russia's remaining systems and radars. And the goal of these operations was to peel back Russia's defenses and set the stage for a so-called drone siege. And that's what we're seeing unfold now. Russia's hold on Crimea has been made increasingly tenuous over time, setting the stage for catastrophic strikes by Ukraine. And what is Ukraine using to conduct these strikes? For the most part, it's cheap, mass-produced medium-range drones like the Hornet, which reportedly costs just over $5,000 USD and is manufactured by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt's defense company, as well as Dart drones, which cost around $1,000 apiece. These drones are cheap and easy to manufacture and difficult to shoot down, and Ukraine has been using them to target Russian trucks and tankers along the R280 highway that serves as the primary connection between Crimea and the Russian mainland. Now lately, that road has earned the nickname the Highway of Death. But it doesn't stop there. Ukraine's middle to long-range drones, such as Firepoint FP1 and FP2, have been striking Russian infrastructure, collapsing bridges, burning down fuel depots, and generally making life difficult for the people on the peninsula. Hence the long lines of cars as people try to leave. Blackouts are becoming more and more frequent, less outside resources are making it onto the peninsula, and fewer exit points remain open. In the final weeks of June, gas stations completely suspended fuel sales to civilians, which is an unprecedented move. And this seems like a sharp escalation and blow to public morale that should put pressure on Moscow when they're already struggling on multiple fronts. So the longer Ukraine can keep it up, the more that pressure compounds. And after a quick break, we'll be joined by a guest to discuss how long this campaign can realistically continue and what results we might expect to see from it. The Kyiv Independent is free and accessible on YouTube, on our website, and on social media because of viewers like you. We're funded primarily by monthly and one-time donations from people around the world who believe in the future of independent journalism and are working together to make sure that Ukraine's voice is heard no matter what. If you'd like to join us and get some cool membership perks in return, including the chance to ask questions to be featured on this show, there will be a link with more information in the description below. Thank you also to everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your support is greatly appreciated. Like I said, this campaign against Crimea comes at a moment when Russia is failing to advance on the ground, and the front line has largely become a gray zone, populated only by drones. Russia is not achieving meaningful success towards any of its stated military goals, and its wartime economy is under increasing pressure from Ukraine's long-range aerial strikes on refineries, transport hubs, and other infrastructure deep inside Russian territory. The war is being brought home to Russians across the country, and the Kremlin is failing to mitigate growing economic and demographic crises amid an increasingly unpopular war. So in this sense, Crimea becoming uninhabitable for Russians is yet another humiliation for Moscow, a symbolic defeat. And that might prove to be the ultimate value of the current operation. I'm joined now by Mykola Bielieskov, a Ukrainian military analyst, to discuss. Okay, so to start with, would you say that this campaign against Crimea is more about military advancement or more about political pressure and symbolic value?
First of all, military stuff doesn't exist in vacuum, and we have ultimate political goal, and this political goal is to guide Vladimir Putin to the conclusion that continue this war is senseless and useless. And for sure, with this kind of campaign, with these strikes, along with strategic strikes and other measures, our ultimate goal is to have a leverage to make Russia cease this war and to negotiate without any kind of preconditions. Because right now, Russia still attached some major political concessions it expects out of Ukraine for its agreement to stop the war, which are unacceptable. So the goal is ultimately, with military means, to create conditions for the settlement of this war without any political preconditions out of Russia, which means sacrificing core Ukrainian national interests.
And at this point, what would it take for Ukraine to fully blockade and isolate Crimea? What would that mean?
Well, it can go on for some time. I mean, thus far we haven't seen ultimate result, ultimate Russian readiness to stop this war. So this is a kind of work in progress, and we haven't seen quite effective Russian cycle of adaptation to decrease the efficiency of these attacks. Because this campaign is going on for almost 2 months. We see a lot of strikes. They are counted in hundreds of instances, but we haven't seen a kind of adaptation. So this campaign still can go on for some time before Russia can adopt or before we can create conditions to negotiate on Ukrainian terms.
And I mean, many outsiders looking at this who maybe don't have all of the information ask, what would it take for Ukraine to fully blockade off Crimea for this to become kind of a permanent isolation?
First of all, we do a kind of military experiment unprecedented in world military history, because usually this kind of strikes for this kind of depths and these types of targets, they are combined with land operations. But since Ukraine is constrained with manpower, we can do counterattacks to improve situation at tactical level, but not major offensives given limits in manpower and given the nature of the war. So we only rely on the strikes, and it's again an experiment with open end. So we only would know post factum how much damage would be enough to say that Crimea, parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson region are fully isolated and become untenable, and then we'll see whether it would translate into inability for the Russian grouping of forces in these parts of Ukraine to function, basically to perform their goals. So since it's unprecedented, it's very difficult to do forecast to say about timeline, but at least we have a couple of more months, because we haven't seen in these 2 months any serious meaningful adaptation out of Russia to decrease the efficiency of Ukrainian attacks.
Before we move on, I'd like to tell you about our new line of clothing, the Old Patterns New Stories collection. It draws on the Ukrainian tradition of embroidery and brings to life traditional motifs from Kyiv Oblast. Along with our limited edition embroidered shirt released in June, we've also collaborated with a local illustrator who uses traditional symbols from the region as the basis for 3 contemporary illustrated pieces representing the past, present, and future of Kyiv. Our members get a 15% discount on every item from our e-store. You can find out more and shop the entire collection at the link in the description below. Now that we've discussed where this campaign might lead, let's return to what we started with, the human impact of trying to isolate Crimea. Like I said in the introduction, relocating Russian nationals to occupied parts of Ukraine is a key part of Moscow's strategy for long-term control of the peninsula. But it's not just about encouraging emigration. There's also tourism. Because creating a sense of ownership and entitlement to occupied territories for all Russian people is also a part of the Kremlin strategy, and that's why Crimea has been pushed as a top tourist destination for Russians since its illegal annexation in 2014. For many, there was a sense that they'd reclaimed something that was rightfully theirs, and now was the time to make use of it. And there are still echoes of that imperialist attitude in the fact that a few Russians are still traveling in for the tourist season, amid oil slicks, fuel shortages, and unpredictable logistics. A major blow to summer plans on the peninsula was the June 22nd decision by regional authorities to suspend all reservations for groups of children at hotels, camps, and resorts. This will last until the end of the summer. But for the business owners, 2026 was already dicey before Ukraine intensified its strikes. Russians made only about 2/3 the number of bookings in Crimea this year as they did last year. And then on top of that, 79% of this year's bookings on the peninsula have been canceled, according to local news site Informer. This amounts to estimated millions of tourists that were predicted to come and then didn't. Travel agents and government officials alike put it down to the economy and largely to the fuel shortages, claiming that no one wants to get stuck on vacation. And as the ruble is stronger this year than it was last year, Ilya Umansky, president of the Russian Union of Travel Industry, speculated that Russians are more inclined to vacation abroad rather than risk the unpredictability of travel to Crimea. A Ukrainian tourism professional who worked in Crimea told the Kyiv Independent that this problem is not wholly new. Prices have gone up since the peninsula was annexed, and it's not the budget-friendly destination that it once was for Russians, regardless of the war. But still, some Russians are still braving the trip across an increasingly small number of entry points to a destination that it might not be so easy to leave. Some of their countrymen mock their behavior online, saying that those who travel to Crimea at such a risk are SVO-brained, or indoctrinated by state TV that still calls the war a special military operation. But others clap back that the danger isn't so great and that to abandon summer plans in Crimea is to let the enemy, Ukraine, win. Still, it's notable that several Russian vloggers have issued warnings this year claiming that it's truly not safe in Crimea, and accusing authorities as high up as the Russian president of downplaying the danger to would-be visitors. This message even comes from personalities that are otherwise pro-war and pro-Russian, which again hammers home what a symbolic humiliation Ukraine's campaign against the peninsula is, and the failure of the Kremlin to mitigate it. We've talked a lot about the effects on Russians who moved or traveled to Crimea after its annexation, but we also have to remember that many people who remain there are people who are from there, who have chosen to stay through occupation and increasingly harsh conditions for various reasons. And we also wanted to hear from them because they pose a huge dilemma. A blockade risks harm to people that ultimately Ukraine wants to reintegrate someday.
My mother lives in Crimea, so do my brother and my whole family. The first thing I want to say is that my family, my mother, are exceptions. The majority of people in Crimea, unfortunately, are not waiting for Ukraine. And their attitude toward this is very different from, for example, my mother's opinion. The main problem is that they have very little information about what is happening there. They are very isolated from real news, from what is really happening. For example, when there is no power because our military hit something, some thermal power station or something else, they are told that something has overheated. That's why there is no power. There is no gasoline. Well, it's because of some other reason. The topic of war is generally avoided, but the reality is different. People go to Krasnodar for gasoline at their own risk because the bridge comes under attack from time to time, and it is clear that it's a target for Ukraine, which is normal. But it's a fact that it is even more dangerous for people to be traveling on it now. Hotel reservations are being cancelled en masse. In general, only Russians went on vacation there, and even they are already returning tickets. As my mother says, well, maybe there won't be any need to kick anyone out. They'll leave on their own because it's scary, because they're no longer comfortable, not as comfortable as they were. But this is only natural. It's clear that if there is a war, it's everywhere. They launch attacks from Crimea on Ukraine. So we will, of course, defend ourselves and shift to the offensive, a more adequate one, where you don't just attack the civilian population, but of course, this affects the civilian population. There's no other way. I personally, for the first time, had some hope that Crimea could return to Ukraine, because we started to attack there more. And what's interesting is that I understood from this situation, and so did my mother, that Crimea is actually very dependent on Ukraine. Our environment, our territory are connected to Ukraine. And what Russia tried to do was artificially create these borders. At first, there were problems with water supply. They artificially built this bridge trying to maintain the viability of Crimea, but it is all starting to crumble. But for the first time, I had hope that it was actually possible that the Russians would just leave on their own, and it wouldn't even be that difficult. There would be no need to persuade anyone. Everything will just fall into place. It'll be fine. My mother is waiting for Ukraine. We are waiting together with her. Our home is there. We have had many generations there. This is our home. We didn't want to sell it for 3 cents to the Russians and flee somewhere.
There are various ways that the rest of this summer could play out in Crimea, but very few of them spell good news for Russia. If the blockade of the peninsula continues, it could serve as one of the biggest humiliations for Putin yet. And according to President Zelensky in late June, the operation is carefully calculated. He then added that if Ukraine receives support promised by Western partners, we will promptly create the conditions that will force Russia to choose peace. So, may those conditions become increasingly apparent in the coming weeks and months.
Hi everyone, my name is Tomina. I'm Deputy Chief Editor at the Kyiv Independent, where I also oversee video, and that's why I would like to use this opportunity to thank you all for watching our channel. But I'm here actually today to answer the member question of the week, which came from Reddit. Cities like Kyiv, Lviv, and Odessa, which were considered tourist cities before the war, have obviously seen a massive drop in foreign visitors. Would visiting these cities today be appreciated or considered in poor taste, given that it's during wartime? Travel the world to explore food and culture. Right now, I can't think of a country that needs my tourism dollars any more than Ukraine. Thank you for this question. We actually have surprisingly quite a lot of foreigners in Ukraine and in Kyiv in particular during war. I'm actually now in one of the busiest and most popular areas among foreigners. When you walk here, you can almost hear English language more than Ukrainian sometimes. Some of them are here for work. Some of them are here to volunteer or just to visit Ukraine and discover our culture, our people, and bring this experience and knowledge back to their communities abroad and support Ukraine through that way. And we at the Kyiv Independent actually have quite a lot of first-hand experience with this because we have almost 34,000 members of our community now, and most of them are from abroad, and they come and visit us regularly. Some of them have made it their tradition now to come at least once a year, and visiting the Kyiv Independence office is a must on the trip always, and we're very happy to have them and meet them in person. And as for your question specifically, well, as I said, I'm in this busy area where a lot of foreigners hang out, and I think they feel pretty welcomed here. I don't think Ukrainians see it as in poor taste to visit the country now. Actually, quite on the contrary. I think for Ukrainians, this is actually a reminder that they're not alone and they haven't been completely abandoned by everyone. And there are a lot of people from across the world who support us and support our struggle. But also, I think it's a reminder for us that what we're fighting for is worth fighting for, because if so many people from across the world choose to be here to visit or be here permanently during war, when obviously it's quite dangerous, then it means that, well, it must be a pretty special country for people to keep choosing it over their security. But obviously, traveling to Ukraine now comes with a lot of security risks, and it must be a choice of each person individually whether they're ready to take that risk. And a lot of people do, but also a lot of people can't come now, can't travel here, and for that reason, we at the Kyiv Independent actually created a whole travel show during war, and sent an entire crew across Ukraine to document what Ukraine is, to show some of the most incredible corners of this country, but also traditions and food and nature and initiatives and art. And the series came together under the name Dare to Ukraine. And it's available on our YouTube channel. And I encourage you all who don't have an opportunity to travel to Ukraine now to go and check out that series. We will leave the link in the description below.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you appreciated this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. And thank you especially to the 4,000 newcomers who helped us meet our recent goal. We are very excited to have you along. It's truly thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.